Good afternoon, welcome back. Get yourself a nice cup of tea, relax, because we are going back to 1834, where Bourdonnais and McDonnell are about to play their 8th game together. We also have Paul Morphy up there in 1859, who's providing commentary. And the state of play so far is that we've had 3 draws and both players have won 2 games each, so it's all to play for. So Bourdonnais this time is starting with the white pieces, and he opens with d4, so it's our first queen's pawn game. McDonnell replies d5, and then we have c4, so queen's gambit. McDonnell accepts the queen's gambit, and Bourdonnais plays knight to c3. In response to this, McDonnell plays f5, and Morphy comments, "Weak. The correct play is e5, which leads to an even game." As was observed in a note to one of the preceding games, McDonnell's radically unsound defences to the queen's gambit greatly detract from the merit of these contests, so beautifully conducted throughout by his antagonist. Okay, so Morphy is making his point of view pretty plain here. So f5 was played and Morphy doesn't like it. Very weak. And we have e3 and now e6. Bishop takes c4 and c6. And again Morphy comments, "Feebly played again. He should have brought out his king's bishop at once." So c6 was played, and Bourdonnais plays knight to f3. We have bishop to d6, and e4 pushing in the center, and b5 attacking this bishop here. So the bishop retreats to b3, keeping an eye on the king side here, and in response, we have McDonnell pushing more pawns on the queen side, a5. And Morphy says, "All this is deplorably weak. McDonnell's conduct of this game would have been unworthy of a player to whom he could have given the odds of a piece." So McDonnell is being criticised here by Morphy, who says that Bourdonnais could have just taken maybe a rook or a knight off the board and he still would have won. So we have a5, e captures on f5, and e captures on f5. So now we have this nice open file between the kings. So Bourdonnais castles, he's heading towards this open file with the rook. And McDonnell just keeps pushing his queenside pawns, so he's attacking the bishop. And instead of retreating, the bishop captures the knight here. So the rook captures, which means McDonnell can now no longer castle on the king side. We have bishop to g5 attacking the queen now, and we have queen moving out of the way to c7. Queen comes to e2 with check, and the king moves aside to f8. And Morphy comments, "Why throw away a move by not moving the king to f7 at once?" And this is because Morphy has looked ahead and he knows that on the very next move McDonnell will be going indeed to f7. So in between that, we have rook to e1, doubling up along the e file again, and then McDonnell, as we said, moves king to f7, so losing time here. Rook on a to c1, lining up with the queen. McDonnell doesn't like this, so he moves the queen aside to b7, and Bourdonnais pushes in the center with d5. McDonnell tries to chase away the bishop, but Bourdonnais ignores it and captures with the pawn on c6. Now McDonnell doesn't have enough time to capture the bishop here because he's got to deal with this threat upon his queen, so he moves the queen to a6. And again, Bourdonnais ignores the threat on the bishop and captures the pawn with the knight on b5. McDonnell takes the chance to takes the opportunity to capture the bishop, and Bourdonnais captures the black bishop, but this comes with check. So the king has to move, and he just walks straight into the other knight's check, so he comes back to f6. Now the queen wants some of the action, so the queen moves into h5, and McDonnell pushes his pawn in order to try to chase away the queen and maybe to set up a nice fortress around the king, but all that happens is the queen goes deeper into his position. Bishop to e6, adding another defender to the black king's fortress here, but Bourdonnais just captures the g6 pawn with the knight. So why can't McDonnell just capture it back? Well, if he does, it'll just be an immediate checkmate with knight to e8. The king is under attack, and all these squares are covered by the queen. This one's covered by the rook on e1, and the king is blocked by all his own pieces. So immediate checkmate. So capturing the knight's out of the question. So McDonnell instead captures the pawn on c6, and maybe he thinks the queen is protecting this, but not really, because McDonnell just immediately captures it with the rook. So is he giving up the rook here? Well, turns out not, because if the queen captures, it's another forced checkmate. We have another rook sacrifice. The king has to capture the rook because it's the only move. Then we have the queen coming in to e7 with check. The king has to move to the only square, and the queen comes down to e5, and again it's checkmate. This square is covered by the knight. The queen's protected by the knight, and all of these remaining squares are covered by the queen. And so another forced checkmate. So he indeed cannot recapture the rook. So McDonnell plays instead queen to d3, and we have queen to e7 with check. And Morphy comments. He says, "White could have mated in 2 moves by 2 different lines of play. Thus, rook captures on e6 with check. The king captures the rook because it's the only move, and queen to f7 with mate. This can't be captured by the king. The king's under attack. The queen's protected by the knight, and all these squares are covered by the queen. And of course this one by the knight." So Morphy gives us the other line, and he says this is more pretty than the first one. So we have queen to f7 with check. So the only move is to capture with the bishop. So this is a queen sacrifice. Then we have knight to e8, which is checkmate because it reveals the attack from the rook. This square's covered. This rook covers all these squares, and of course you can't capture the knight because the c6 rook is covering it. So very nice. But that wasn't played. We had queen to e7 with check. The king has to capture the knight on g6 because it's the only move. The rook captures the bishop and it's check. There's one move for the king again, which is h5. We have queen to h7 delivering another check. Again, there's not many moves for the black king left, so he goes to g4. We have c4, rook to c4, protected by the knight, so the pawn is pushed to block it. But now, of course, we have h3 with check, and the only move for McDonnell to play is a queen captures on h3, which is immediately met by queen captures on h3 with checkmate. So a very convincing crushing of McDonnell by Bourdonnais here in 30 moves. And I very much enjoyed Morphy's brutal commentary. And so Bourdonnais is up 3 games to 2, and I hope to see you back again for game 9. Thank you.